I don't know if it was actually a podcast. Like, did we?
We'll turn it into one.
Yeah, I'm gonna say. Today we're talking about what everybody's talking about: Drake versus Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, I think as we've like sort of morphed into what we're trying to figure out here, it's interesting to like. I really am thankful for you and kind of like acknowledging some of the like really like underlying tone of this battle
yeah,
and the ways that it relates to you, your existence, the way that you have grown and come to understand yourself.
yeah.
Hey y'all, she's Hannah.
He's Greg.
She's adopted.
He's not.
She's black.
He's not.
And this is
The Fake Siblings Podcast.
Growing up as adoptive siblings presented unique challenges.
That's not your real brother.
How long have you been dating? The realness of our siblingship was often called into question, and we want to talk about it.
Because despite it all, we've always been super close.
And ain't nothing fake about that.
You know, Kendrick released that song. You know, they not like they not like us. They not like, which is a bop, by the way. Anyway, and I feel like we sing it. You know, adoptees, we might be singing like they not like us, but I think that like if we're not careful, they are like us. Because I think that like I think what we see with Drake here is Drake doesn't know who he is.
Yeah, he's been a character for so long.
Yeah, he doesn't know who he is. So he's literally just trying things. I mean, it's literally like Arrested Development. Because, like, this is what you do developmentally. You try out different things.
Yeah.
You see what sticks. I mean, it's a part of, like, identity development theory.
That's a really interesting
It's
point.
like you try out different things. You see what sticks. This typically happens during adolescence. You try out different things. See, like, how you see how people perceive it. You see what feels right inside, like, your body. And then you, like, decide.
I think your point of Arrested Development is really interesting because he's raised with a white Jewish mother in affluent neighborhoods of Toronto, Canada.
Yeah.
And so he identifies with white culture because that's what he grew up in. And it's what he knew and what he knows. And so as he grows up, finds fame as an actor on an almost predominantly white show.
Right.
And yeah, right. I mean, I think one of the things that I admire so much about you is that you grew up in this entirely white town and you have really like found your lanes and really done a lot of like you've done like so much work on yourself and on your growth. And you've done it, I don't know. I'm trying to think about like what I'm getting at, but I like see parallels and I hear what you're saying about Arrested Development. And so and I think that so let's look at Arrested Development. Shout out to the TV show.
Shout out to the TV show Arrested Development. Shout out to the band Arrested Development. All of them. Just shout them out.
So a couple definitions. An abnormal state in which development has stopped prematurely. A plateau of development in some sphere has been reached. So it's interesting thinking about Drake's childhood and that like for the beginning of his childhood, he spent most of his summers in the city of Memphis, is what it sounds like. And so I'm certain that there's some like knowledge of the Black experience or like
at least from like the lens of his family, yeah.
Yeah. But I also wonder what exactly that was like for him because
I wonder what the amount of depth to that was.
Yeah, and so he's taken this like very, I don't know, I think in a lot of ways fortunate upbringing. You know, his dad having been a drummer with Jerry Lee Lewis.
Right.
Like his dad knows the rhythm and blues.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
But like, you know, he grew up playing hockey, which I think is a very affluent sport. It takes a lot of money to play hockey. Does. Sure, like you're in Canada, so maybe it's a little
more like
less challenging up there.
But I'm like, if he's playing hockey, he's growing up in an affluent part of Toronto. He's probably one of the only brown people wherever he is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would just imagine that like he probably didn't grow up with a lot of access to Black culture in his everyday life, especially after his dad was locked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like his mom and dad were together until he was 5 in Toronto.
Okay.
Um,
But then if his dad is a famous musician, well, musicians don't necessarily make lots and lots of money, but
well, right, and he was arrested on drug charges.
so he also could have had addiction problems, which Kendrick also alludes to in the Meet the Graham song.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I was trying to say, continue to do what you're looking for, but I think what I was trying to like get at is how like adoptees. I think we are much more likely to be Drake in this situation than Kendrick.
Mm. Okay, so you see the parallels too.
I see him. Oh, I see him.
Do you feel like that's okay? So much more likely to be Drake.
Than Kendrick. I know. The reason why I say that is because we also grow up with it, like typically not every adoptee grows up with wealth,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of us do because adoption, especially if you're privately adopted,
Yeah.
is a very expensive thing to do.
Yeah.
So a lot of us grow up with socioeconomic privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think that if we are not careful in our identity journeys, we could also fall into the same thing that I'm theorizing Drake is falling into, which is like in our attempts to resolve our identity issues, we characterize what we think
is the culture
because we've been removed from it.
Mm-hmm.
We pretend to embody the culture from our faulty perspectives and exploit it as a result.
Do you feel like you have fallen into that trap at some point in time?
I think that there is an element of, as the transracial adoptee, not having access to culture, not having access to community. I know there are times, especially in high school, where I felt pressure to perform blackness because I was not being perceived as white, although like culturally I had grown up in this very white space. And so there was pressure on me that I put on myself, but also pressure on me from my environment. I think of the Donald Glover bit where he talks about being the black kid who moved to the white school and how everybody's like,
they were like, hey, Donald, what kind of rap music you into, and what kind of sneakers you like? And I was like, oh, I don't really like rap music. I really enjoy the soulful stylings of the Cranberries. We can talk about that. And they were like, nah, man, you like sneakers and you like rap music, and you go tell us which one you like. I was like, oh, you're hurting me, Steven, you know?
And so it's like, there's also pressure socially for you to perform blackness from the white gate. So like whatever the white,
I mean, you almost
conceptualization of blackness is, it's like they have those, you feel that pressure either like implicitly or explicitly to perform it.
Yeah.
Because it pleases the white folks.
Yeah.
Because it's cool.
Yeah.
So like, you know, if you're dancing at the disco dance, you better believe a circle of people's gonna come around and watch you. So there's like a pressure to like know what that like. How do I dance like the black folks dance? Like there's a pressure to perform blackness.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think I've fallen into it especially as like a adolescent. Yeah, for sure.
Are we both growing sympathy for Drake here?
I mean, I kind of already had a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I did say like I definitely am biased because I am a Kendrick fan and have been.
I also think that unequivocally Kendrick has won this.
Oh, for sure, and is just unequivocally is the better rapper and has been and will remain to be.
Yes, it's not the big three; it's the big two. I do think that J. Cole.
I think J. Cole could be in that conversation. I think, but I think it's like we're comparing like Michael Jordan and LeBron James and like.
I actually
some guy that's not as good as them. That's still good.
Right.
Still doing what he needs to do.
Yeah.
But like maybe just not quite as.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So I'm sorry, but yes, to answer your question, are we growing empathy for Drake? Yes, I am growing empathy for Drake. I already was. When Kendrick said to Drake, "How many more black features until you feel like you're black enough?" My little biracial heart was like,
yeah.
I could never like hear Kendrick Lamar say that to me. I would be a hot mess.
Uh-huh.
But I just feel like there is something about the biracial experience where it's like you just want to belong, and so those features might be his like attack. What you said, he wants to be accepted. That's like the opening part of Euphoria, with desires of being accepted, and so I think that like that's what, and I feel like it's like.
I mean, yeah, and I think that it's.
But I do think. Sorry, finish.
I mean, I think it's valuable that Kendrick points that out, and notices that, right?
Yeah, Kendrick is very perceptive, which again,
Is
black
that why he's held his tongue, and why he doesn't just
just let it
shoot
fire.
off?
I think so. I also think that like this is one thing that I have often told other transracial adoptees who are like trying to figure out their identity issues is like black folks are some of the most perceptive people I've ever met, in that like they just know how to smell a fake, man. Maybe it's the hyper vigilance that comes with generational trauma. So like if you are trying to pretend to do something, like you're gonna be it's gonna be perceived, and it's probably just you're not gonna have the effect that you're hoping it will. Yeah, I think Kendrick's clocking him.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because I haven't listened to Drake's most recent response, and it feels like if Drake took a little time to really reflect, he could maybe see some of the points that Kendrick is making.
Yeah, I think so. I think Drake is terribly unaware of himself.
Sure.
But I think that
He's
that's
never had to be,
yeah,
or seemingly. I don't
yeah.
know.
It seems that way. Like even from like the psychological like evaluation we're
I wonder if he's gotten so far
making
into
for him.
like this character that like this is who he is now, right? Like I wonder if there is like a Drake behind closed doors that.
I think there is like an Albie Graham
Right.
that's there. That's
Right.
like
I feel like Drake is who he is now. That it's Aubrey's just the name.
yeah,
I don't know.
maybe. I don't know, but I think that yeah, I do offer service identity reclamation coaching for adult adoptees where I would walk them through like basically my whole thing is like you're in the middle of identity crisis and you need support. So I help them in that situation. And
Drake by reclamation
I
classes.
mean, come on, Drake. I mean, actually, I think we need probably a lot more than that. But you know, we haven't even gotten to the other allegations.
Yeah.
But yes, you know, consider it. I think that what was I saying? Oh, the service. In that, I start explaining like this the basic elements of identity development. So that's what I was referring to earlier about like it seems like he has some arrested development, and that like during adolescence, typically you are trying out different ways of being. The way that I like to explain it to my clients is like think of it like a dressing room, and you're trying on like different personalities, versions of self, and then you take it out to like this audience that is the world, and then you make these assessments about what commitments you're going to make. And once you've made your commitments about your identity, that's what's called, I think it's what James Marcia calls it, or yeah, basically like that's what's called identity achievement. So it's when you've made those commitments,
Made commitments to.
your identity. So it's like who you are, the kind of occupational field or direction you want to move in, religious views. These things are typically like these are decisions that are made during adolescence, young adulthood, and it's when you make those commitments. Of course, everyone growth mindset, everyone's able to change, but that's typically like when we make these core like decisions. Um, But there are other things too. So there's identity achievement. There's also identity disillusion, which is that like you don't ever make any commitments. You're just kind of like a hot mess. And then there's identity moratorium, which is like this phase typically in life. A lot of times it happens to people in college where like you have the freedom and the incubator and the space where you can like be whoever you want to be, see how it works out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool. And so like it's a phase in that process. And there's identity abandonment or something. That's not it. Identity, but basically it's like you pretty much let your identity be whatever your parents' identity was. Like you pretty much leave the commitments to others. So you fall in line to whatever. Like so, like people who grew up in like very like orthodox religious or very like restrictive religious communities might relate to like that kind of thought of that of like you just kind of I think it might be called like identity has to do with like resigning to your identity. Foreclosure.
Have committed to an identity without having explored the options.
Yes.
I mean, that's what acknowledging privilege is.
Uh-huh.
You know? And so like the folks who are in denial about acknowledging privilege, they live inside that box
of foreclosure.
Yeah. And maybe they like catch some stuff from time to time, but they just like let it bounce off. And so like acknowledging privilege is no longer living in the happiness and bliss of ignorance that is
of the show, of the production. You're aware of the what third wall or the fourth wall or third wall has been broken. So it's like yeah. Anyway, but I that's a big digression. But basically I feel like I go through the basic pieces of identity development with my clients just so they can understand it, and then we work through a lot of stuff, but basically just so they can understand it, and then I kind of walk through how hopefully we can get them towards closer to achievement.
Yeah. And so so I think sort of like bringing it back to like yours or the adoptee experience, then it can be really challenging because this like identity development that we're discussing typically happens during adolescence. And so if you're growing up without anybody around you who looks like you, they all do act like you, but because you were raised very similar to them, like within the white culture or wherever. I mean, I guess like identity foreclosure is something that can very much happen.
Happens to a lot of adoptees. Right. So I think that's why I bring that up, is that like, even though I don't think it applies in the situation here with Drake, I feel like identity foreclosure is a definite outcome that happens for adoptees. And I have helped coach adoptees work through coming out of that, which a lot of people like call coming out of the fog. Or it kind of speaks to that, which is like an adoptee turn of phrase that has to do with like the fog lifting from this like kind of, somewhere again to that Truman Show analogy or whatever. They've just like, you start to see that there might be something happening beyond this world, this small world that I've only ever known. But yes, I think that like what I'm thinking with Drake is more so that like he's stuck in like identity development.
Yeah. Or he's committed to an identity without having explored the other option.
Real rap. Or he's committed to an identity that is a fabrication.
Yeah. And so maybe now he's exploring.
Yeah.
Maybe someday he'll come out of the fog.
I don't know. I think that like,
I think he's made too much money in the fog to ever come out of it.
Yeah.
That's how it feels a little bit. Although, who knows?
Yeah, we believe in growth mindset. So
yeah, true that.
He can change and grow. But I think it's going to be a lot. Also, like, I think there are a lot of adoptees who are famous actors. And I think that, like, there's something to that. And that, like,
I'll play any role.
I can do that because like lack of self or makes for good ability to
it's easier to play a character than to
deal with the hopeless void of selflessness. Yeah. Anyway, but yes, I was thinking about this, and I was just thinking about how, like, as transracial adoptees specifically, we have to be careful of not being culture vultures ourselves.
Yep.
And that, like, we can easily put on the culture from a place of consumer as like a character.
Yeah.
And I guess like my thought is like the reason why I feel like I'm not doing that. Well, I think there's like something to like how do you then not do that? Because like you do in a lot of ways grow up divorced from your culture. Like how do you have secure identity as a transracial adoptee?
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's a $1 million question right there.
Yeah. So what do you do?
Well, I think first of all, we have to think about positive racial identity and like identity security as a spectrum. It is not some the growth mindset again. It's
Everything
not,
exists on the spectrum.
yeah, it's not just a thing you arrive at. There are still times where I feel insecurity around my identity, even though
Of course.
my life, the life that I built, family that I built, it is Black centered intentionally. But that still doesn't mean I don't have those feelings of.
If I can pump you up here a little bit, I
Yeah.
think like the ways that I see that you have like grown through this like identity development is, I mean, you do the work daily.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot of internal work, but also you, I mean, every week we come on here and you amaze me with your psychological knowledge, right? And like, you know, theoretical, but also the way that you practice and have like learned about those things. And that you acknowledge, I mean, you acknowledge the spectrum, you acknowledge all of these different ways that people come to their identity. And I think that that speaks to the resilience that you've had to live through and work through. And I don't think that I'm doing this entirely
I think you're doing great.
But I think of like the most confident, smartest Black women that I know and have worked with, and I'm like, yeah, Hannah speaks with a similar amount of knowledge as those women. And you've come from a place of very like little depth, or for lack of, and I think you've committed to a journey of self-identity and like of acknowledging and accepting things that have made you who you are. Yeah. And you claim it in a way that I think is really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you being up in me. I do think that like there is a way to authentically have identity achievement as a transracial adoptee. And I feel confident in saying that like I feel that way about myself. And I think that like it's because I've had the ability to explore ways of being, been able to see how Blackness is deep, broad, and versatile. It's not a monolith. I've seen that. Yeah, I just think that like.
Do you have an identity achievement workbook?
I don't, but I should, huh? But that's what I'm basically writing that. That's what my memoir is pretty much. It's like it's not a workbook, but it's like the story of how I have accomplished identity achievement. And basically like the thesis behind that is that like I sought for so long to find acceptance and like validation. And I think that like the thesis is like ultimately you have to accept yourself. And I had to accept myself at like the time when I felt least acceptable. I think that what makes Black people so amazing is their authenticity, them living into who they are and how their lived experience informs how they show up, all these things. And I think that like that's what I try to embody. I'm not trying to like put on how I want others to perceive me. I'm not trying to put on like what I think Black womanhood looks like. I'm being myself. And myself is a Black woman who was adopted by white people, who likes to watch cult documentaries and rap battle stuff. And like, I just think that I've been in enough spaces and with enough amazing people to realize that like black, there's enough room for me in what it means to be a black person. I think you have to come to that like conclusion, but it takes the space to be able to explore and the people to, you know, look out for you. I had a lot of amazing black women pour into me and show me things, and I read a lot, learned a lot, and
Are learning a lot.
are learning a lot, am learning a lot,
Are reading a lot.
am reading a lot, am writing a lot. I reflect a lot.
Yeah.
I really try to be self-aware. I really like tell on myself even when I don't want to, because I think that like that's, I don't know.
I hear you big up in yourself.
No, I really do.
And you should.
I really feel that way. Like I wouldn't be writing this book if I felt like I was just selling people a thing of like I got it. I'm like I know that I don't completely got it. Nobody completely got it.
Right.
But like I wouldn't be writing a book about identity reclamation if I didn't feel like I actually had reclaimed my identity. But again, it's a reclaiming. It's not claiming something that's not my. I'm not trying to go into black spaces. I'm not Rachel Dolezal. I'm not trying to go to black spaces and say like, I grew up in Compton, and like I just feel like I think growing in my identity security is me realizing that like I am a black woman, a biracial black woman, but I am a black woman, and that's that. My lived experience is enough for me to be worth hearing. Sometimes I'm not the one who should be speaking in the room. It's just like that's that level of self-awareness and that level of authenticity of like I am who I am. That's all it is. So Drake, you gotta figure out who the F you are.
Aubrey.
Whoever that is, be that, man. I think that's why we love Kanye, and I think that's why. Well, I mean Kanye. Okay, maybe not, but that's why we loved Kanye.
Yeah.
Is because he was in hip hop, killing it as like the middle class black boy. Grew up with a mom who was a teacher, real smart, dropping out of college, like had these dreams of becoming this person, but his mom had these aspirations for him, to go to school and be this person. She was an educator, like, but he wasn't out here like I was gang banging, pow 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 in Chicago. He could have been saying all that, but he wasn't. He's like, I'm
college dropout,
and I'm wearing polos and
he's come a long way.
This,
he's come a long way from there.
Yeah,
he's maybe not doing that work anymore.
Yeah, well, he's also like not well, so
yeah,
I'll give him some grace. But yeah, like, yeah, I think J. Cole is another example of like J. Cole is also biracial. J. Cole is also, I don't know how close he had a white mom. I don't know how close he is with his dad. He was with his dad growing up. But I feel like J. Cole stays in J. Cole's lane.
I'm really thankful that we went down the J. Cole rabbit hole
we did.
amidst all of this, because like the diss track, but then his like backtracking from it, I think really shows that J. Cole is doing the work. It struck me as him wanting to lift people up rather than put people down.
Yeah.
And that's part of his journey, and that's where
who
he is.
He feels like is his most authentic self. Is I'm the person that I want to be, the person that lifts people up. Yeah, like that comes from figuring out who you are. Comes from experiential, knowledge, and like just knowledge that you surmise over time and your lived experience.
Look up J. Cole's apology.
Yeah,
maybe he's come out of this the winner.
I think. Yeah, I think so. I think especially for us like transracial adoptees, I think J. Cole is the winner in the situation and the model that's worth following.
I mean, it shows tremendous growth. I mean, he talks in a 3-minute apology. He talks about how the diss track was him 10 years ago, even though he had just released it. But it was like,
he was saying like it's inauthentic of me to be like clowning Kendrick's work because I'm a fan of Kendrick Lamar.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that, but that comes from like a place of like you having like reflecting.
Mm-hmm. It's all, yeah, it's so much about reflection.
It's just so hard for like, I think it is so much about reflection.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a huge part of why I am who I am, because I spend arguably too much time reflecting. Yeah, but it makes me very aware of like who I am, and I'm rarely aware of who I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good.
And ways that those two things conflict is one of the ways that it shows up for me sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway.
I see you.
Thanks for listening to the Fake Siblings podcast. And before you shut this off, we have a few simple requests.
1, subscribe to the pod. B, leave us a glowing review. 3rd, follow us on all the socials at Fake Siblings Pod.
We release new episodes every Wednesday, so until next time.
Thank you for listening.
Bye, y'all. I mean, first try. Okay. But I did want to do a diss song over BBL Drizzy. But I can do that on my own. But I feel like it has to be about how he needs to grow up. It's gonna be really deep about his identity.
It should be about identity achievement.
It should be like, you need to read some Marcia immediately. Eric Erickson. Read him.
This is the makings of a really
I know, right?
excellent track.
This is where you see that I'm more like Drake than Kendrick.